Hi all. I had a very dramatic game last night playing for Muswell Hill. It was a home match against Ealing, a very strong Ealing side, all 180s virtually on all 8 boards, apart from their bottom board, I think it was 175 or something. I was playing against Randall, S. Randall on board 4. He's 185, so quite close to my own rating. I played knight f3, and he nearly forfeited on time actually. He came about 29 minutes in. It's like 30 minutes default time, or maybe 2 minutes before default time. Anyway, he arrived, and I had an interesting evening, very interesting evening. So let's see what happened. So c4, bishop g7. Now I played knight c3, and he played d6. So all pretty bog standard so far. G3, and now he plays E5, and I'm wondering here, do I let him carry on routinely with, say, F5 and knight G7, or do I try and interrupt him in the centre? I thought I'd play D4, because I've played this a few games ago, if you may remember, and there was a decision in that game where Black played knight C6, and I avoided knight C6, but here I thought, well, I'd gone over that game with Ribkin. It is a slight binding advantage to take on C6, giving Black, the potential counterplay on the diagonal. But there's other factors here, because this bishop's very good on the diagonal, tying, Black defensively. And if Black ever plays C5, he's losing control of some of these light squares. So it's quite a complex situation to assess here. The counterplay and the pressures versus the mobility of this structure, and when it does move, what squares are weakened, and this bishop as well. So I think overall White's slightly better here, and I played a very aggressive move now after he defended that pawn. I just played h4, and he reacted. Apparently, the computer doesn't like his reaction at all to this. Just casting or rook b8 is given. Apparently, this h6 now gives me quite a good small advantage to work with. And I thought the position looked good, so h5, and I just tried to blast him with f4. And the interesting thing is, he played g4, and I was really expecting that after e4 him to play f5. But maybe I'm fine here. He's depriving his knight of a good square, and I think I'll be slightly better. Let's have a quick look at this position with Ribka. Actually, this is one position I didn't analyse earlier. So if f5 here, which I thought was the logical sort of move. Okay, apparently it's a small advantage. Bishop e3. So maybe that's a good idea, just to try and weaken the dark squares with bishop d4 later, perhaps. All right, that's enough of Ribka. I'm just going to use prepared notes from earlier, from now on. So e4, he just castled. So he lets me, engulf the g pawn, and there's a bit of a bluff going on now. Anyway, I accept the first part of the bluff. I play f5, so I'm threatening just to win the pawn with queen takes g4. But now he really does set up the bluff with his next move, king h7. And I didn't assess this properly. Maybe it's too much blitz chess, because the position seemed a bit frightening. If I played queen g4, queen takes g4, bishop e5, for some reason I was concerned about this position. That, well, I've given him that big e5 square, and maybe g-file pressure, and it looks visually at this moment, well, it looked to me as though Black was going to be doing fine in this position, but this is the best way for White to play the position. One thing about it is, after munching the pawn, it's not just the pawn. The bishop can now go to f4, supported by the queen. So that bishop on e5 isn't so brilliant on e5. And then, for example, well, let's have a look at an example variation I looked at earlier. So bishop f4, rook g8. Now the queen can just slip back to f3. And it's difficult to suggest what Black will do here, because I would have now the strong, threat of just taking and rook d1. And if the bishop went back, that's fairly passive. He doesn't really want to do that. So, I just maybe castle queenside. So the queen would be supporting the c3 knight as well. And I don't think this b-file pressures much. So that would have been great. But of course I didn't play that. I played a silly move instead, blocking my queenside, causing congestion of these pieces. I played queen d2 because I wanted to prevent, bishop e5, and maybe engulf the pawn in a different way with rook h4. So that was the theory, but in practice he just plays knight g8, and so he's defending adequately, the h6 pawn. But the worst aspect of this position compared to what I've previously shown you is this congestion on the queen side. So it's nothing to do with really gaining the pawn, it's the position that results. If I can, this bishop's still at home, getting it out to f4 and being able to play rook d1 would have been a luxury. But now I'm starting to get, positionally worse. So rook h4, he just plays rook e8, threatening immediately bishop takes f5 if I dare to take the pawn. So I move my king. Now his bishop comes here, so his bishop's kind of active and attacking. I don't really want to play a move like b3, weakening the diagonal and setting myself up for d5. So I played actually just rook takes g4, allowing the bishop to come into the game a bit. Bishop takes c4, king g1. So I've manually castled, but I've given him some positional trump cards now. Obviously the bishop's huge now again on e5. Not only that, the rook is vulnerable now on g4, and I'm not really threatening rook takes g8. I mean, yeah, in the ideal world he'll take with the rook and then allow queen h6, but that's not going to happen, and this is harmless. King takes, queen h6, say queen f6. There's nothing going on. He dominates the dark squares. So I've just been provoked, into a horrible position here, and I've misplayed it, not getting that pawn earlier to be able to challenge this mighty bishop on e5. So I'm just standing worse now, and I find this move knight d1. I thought it's better than trying to play b3. So knight d1's kind of active, aggressive move. Knight e3 potentially to g4, hitting also c4 with tempo. So he plays d5, liberating his position. But there's something going on here now again. After knight e3, even though my queen side's congested, after knight f6, he has to play accurately this position, and he didn't. He let me sacrifice the exchange in a slightly favourable way. After e takes d5, Rybka really likes actually for black not taking the rook straight away, just playing bishop takes d5. If the rook has to waste time now moving, then black's going to be better with, say, bishop g2. Black controls. So to look at this queenside congestion, that's the way to play it. But no, he gave me some play here. He actually, after ed, he played knight takes g4. After knight takes g4, he had a cunning, resource here to defend h6 and attack my queen. He played queen g5. But this isn't a bad position for white now. I just played it wrong again. If I'd just taken here on e5, although I'm the exchange down, this is very good because these pawns are weak, and if I get a bishop to f4, I'll be like, on that pawn. So for example, in this position, knight e5, queen d2, bishop d2, takes d2, rook takes e5, bishop f4, and white is fine according to Rybka. It's if rook f5, there's bishop e4 skewering, and if the rook moves, then I pick up another pawn, and it's starting to be unpleasant for black. I've got quite a few pawns for the exchange, so this would be fine. Advantage to white, believe it or not. I mean, the bishops are quite powerful in this scenario. But no, I misplayed it. It's really quite unfortunate. I just took on g5 straight off the bat. So I just get an inferior version of that same idea now. So now I take, but this is a big difference to before, because he's taking on d5 and my bishop, is stuck on g5 here. So he's clearly better now, and I thought I was going to lose. Actually, it's looking bleak. It's only one pawn for the exchange at the moment, and I'm quite far away from playing bishop f4 because well, his rook's got access to e2, so I try and stop this access to e2. I play bishop f1, and also, of course, rook f5 is still bishop d3. But now he goes after my h pawn. This is quite interesting. I was getting a bit excited again. That, hold on, isn't this really risky to try and win this h pawn because his king's behind there? So I play bishop d3 and he takes on h5. So I sidestep my king to allow rook h1 to happen.